As I said in my earlier video, the GFS is not showing any good storms for the next 15 days. I'm sorry. But, now, I'm going to talk about the rest of the winter going into spring and how we might have a very active tornado season this year again. And here's why. The GFS, not the GFS, the way the Pacific Ocean is working out with the PDO going I don't know, negative or positive, but it's acting as the way it did in 2011, 2010, 2011. So I believe that this spring we're going to have a very, very active tornado season. I don't know if it's going to be as active as 2011. I think it's going to be somewhere in the cross between 2011 and 2012. So it's going to be in between those 2 years. It's going to be like, you're not going to have like 2, 3, 4, like it's not going to be as active as 2011, and it won't be as quiet as 2012. And it's going to be above average. I guarantee you, this year is going to be above average. We actually might have a tornado outbreak in the southeast later this week, Thursday, going into Friday. There's a good chance of a tornado outbreak. Late Thursday night, going into Friday morning. No, sorry. Thursday night going to Friday. Or is it? But sometime we might have a tornado outbreak, most likely Thursday, Wednesday night going into Thursday morning. Very likely we could have a tornado outbreak. And for the East Coast, the squall line in New York City should hit early Thursday morning. Between 6 a.m. and midday, the squall should hit. And then rapidly falling temperatures. Temperatures should probably peak in the mid to upper 50s, and then they're going to drop very suddenly with the passage of the front. And just as the precipitation is moving away, as I said in earlier video, there could be a brief change over to snow. For this summer, I'm predicting it's going to be warm. It's going to be very hot. Not like last year, no. It's not going to be like last year. It's going to be cooler. It's going to be wetter. And it's going to be stormier. For hurricanes, I'm looking at a very active year. 60 named storms at least. I'm expecting 16 to 20 storms. Why? Because we're transitioning from El Nino going into neutral and then into La Nina. So I expect another active year. I think this year the East Coast might have another devastating hit. Not in New York this time. Between Florida and the Carolinas, I expect a strong hurricane to affect late August into early October. I expect a hurricane. Most likely, though, it's going to hit in the middle of September. I expect a hurricane, the Cape Verde hurricane, to come up the coast like this and hit the Carolinas. I think the Carolinas are going to get a bad storm this year. It's going to be like 2003. I think it's going to be an Isabel-type storm. I expect it to happen somewhere in September, and I expect the name to be between a F and a J. Right in between those, most likely the hurricane will have an I name. Yeah, these ice storms. It's just funny. Like, I'm using my iPad right now, and they're talking about ice storms. But, like, Isaac, thankfully, was not as bad as forecasted. But I think what's going to hit the Carolinas will be an ice storm. A hurricane with the letter I in it. Just like Isabel was an ice storm, I expect another ice storm to hit the Carolinas. Late August, probably. Early September. I think New York City is not going to get the storm as bad. Maybe just the outer bands. Thing is, I expected Sandy. I expected a devastating hurricane to hit New York City. Unfortunately, I was right. And when I saw Sandy, even before Sandy formed, even before it was even a tropical depression, I knew New York City was going to get devastated. I saw the storm going up the coast, going into Maine. I knew that the storm was going to change course and it was going to hit New York City. I even was telling my parents that there's a chance a hurricane could hit New York City. No one believed me. And then 5 days later, all the models are now coming together of a hurricane coming to New York City. It was still 4 days. I expected Sandy to hit New York City. Well, it wasn't called Sandy then. It was not even a tropical depression. I expected the storm to hit 9 days before it hit. But I wasn't really sure if it was going to. Then it was, and I was using the GFS. Then the GFS said no, it was not going to happen. And the Euro was saying now it might. And the Euro was a very reliable model. When I first saw the GFS hinting on Sandy, future Sandy at that time, I was sure it was going to happen. And I was sure it was not going to go into New England. I was sure it was going to hook in really quickly. Because I knew that the NAO was going very negative. It was like -2, -3 levels. -2, almost -3. And I knew something was going to happen. I just wasn't sure exactly how it was going to happen. But I knew something big was going to happen and something very bad was going to happen. And unfortunately, it had to be Sandy. And if the NAO goes negative into March, we could have a big snowstorm in the middle of March. We could have an 1888 type storm if the NAO goes negative. If it does not, March will be warm and mild and wet. But this year's, it's going crazy, I could tell. First, I'll give you one reason for this. Why is the world having so much cold and crazy weather? It's the sunspots and the North Atlantic Current. Human activity has been melting or global warming has been melting the polar ice. And this has been diluting the Gulf Stream. That is why England is getting all this cold. Europe is getting all this cold. The beginning of the North Atlantic Current shutdown is already beginning. It's already causing all this wild weather in Europe. And with the new water minimum about to set in, it's going to get worse. By 2020, solar cycle 25 could be the weakest in centuries. This is already the weakest solar cycle in a century. And the next solar cycle will be even weaker. Why? Because the solar conveyor belt is rapidly slowing down. And NASA is now predicting solar cycle 25 to be the weakest in centuries. That's good news for humans. I'll tell you why. Satellites will no longer be fried in space. You won't have all these electromagnetic storms ruining our circuitry. And it will slow down man-made global warming and even reverse it and cause a little ice age. That's what's going to happen. As humans start transitioning from burning fossil fuels into burning more nuclear energy, because there's this one nuclear energy called thorium, that there's enough on this planet to power the planet 10,000 years at our current energy usage. And thorium also could burn our nuclear waste stockpile. Yep, and turn it back into pure uranium. This could result in an endless cycle of renewable energy from nuclear. That's what scientists are now beginning to realize. It'll be the end of global warming, man-made global warming. But then we'll have a threat of natural global cooling because of low solar activity. But is this set in stone? No, it's not. But 5 years ago, now I'm going to talk about solar activity again. This Russian scientist, Abdul Abmustratov, warned humanity that solar cycles in this century will get weaker and weaker and to the point of almost non-existence, and that the Earth is under the threat of a new little ice age. The little ice age occurred just after the medieval warm period, or medieval climate optimum, which occurred in the early between the 1000 and 1200s, and then followed this crash in temperatures because of solar activity and the North Atlantic Current collapsing and volcanoes. It was a whole mess, and it caused the bubonic plague. Well, indirectly, but it caused it indirectly, and humanity could see this once again. Earth right now is under the threat of a new little ice age. This is why we're seeing so many tornadoes. This is why we're seeing so many hurricanes. This is why we're seeing so many floods and natural weather-related disasters. The earthquakes and the volcanoes, that's geological. That has nothing to do with the climate. Or it does a little bit, but not really. The North Atlantic current is already beginning to be diluted. We're already heading into cold periods in the oceans. We're getting we're getting more La Niñas now than El Niños. It's already beginning. From just 1 week solar cycle, it's already beginning. Imagine what's going to happen when we have lots of cold solar cycles. It's going to get really bad. It's going to get really, really bad. It's not going to be suddenly. It's going to be slow. It's like by the 2050s, New York City might have a climate like the way it did during the Little Ice Age. We might be having blizzards like 1978 almost every winter. It could be that bad. The Great Lakes might become fully frozen every winter. New York Harbor could freeze. London might have these frost fairs again. And the English Channel might become ice covered if all these scenarios come together. Well, thank you. Have a great day.